Stephen, I made it.
Hey, Richard.
Hello, all.
Hi, Joanne. Christopher.
Hello.
Stephen Morey.
Joe Grouse and Peter McEachern are not coming. Chris, per your reminder, I remembered to go get my flu shot.
Excellent.
Today's the last day, I think, isn't it?
Friday.
Or
Friday.
Friday?
Friday's the last day of the drive up.
Yeah.
You'll always you'll be able to get flu shots here, but it won't be as convenient.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, and am I supposed to call this one to order?
I was just going to ask if you would mind doing the honors because I don't have my Charlie Baker spreadsheet in front of me.
Yeah, and John, after you do
Yes, I have mine.
after you do your script, then we'll have each board call to order.
Okay. Okay, we, as a preliminary matter, this is Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I'll go through my board members and staff members and then turn it over to the other chairs. Christy Ferrantella. Here. Melissa Murphy. Jason Bridges.
Here.
I'm here. Sorry.
Thanks, Melissa. I don't see Matt. And I know we have Libby
yet.
Gibson, Erica Mooney,
Present.
Brian Turbot,
Present.
Rick Sears.
Present.
Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees participating by video conference accordingly be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share your screen of your computer, as anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I just missed an entire portion of this. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you will find posted with your agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. We have no attendees, but the feature is available. Someone had a question. As we go through the agenda, one of the chairs will introduce each speaker, and each vote will be taken by roll call. I'll turn it over to the chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm Denise Crona, the Chair of the Finance Committee, and with this, I'll do a roll call of the Finance Committee members attending in the order in which I see you. Peter Schaefer.
Here.
Jill Veith.
Here.
Chris Kowacki.
Here.
Joanna Roche.
Here.
Stephen Morey.
Here.
George Harrington. George is on mute. We have a quorum in any case, and with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen Welsh.
Yeah, so good afternoon. Stephen Welch. I serve as chair of the Capital Program Committee. In order that I see him, Jason Bridges, who is our select board liaison.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella, who is our NPNEDC liaison.
Here.
Let's see here, Richard Hussey
Here.
and Christy Kickham
Here.
and Peter Kaiser
Here.
and myself, Stephen Welch. Okay, great. Libby, are you there? There you are. Sorry, I can't see everyone. I was thinking maybe I would just jump in if you're good with that.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, so I just wanted to first say hi to everyone. Glad you could make it. We hope you all had a chance to tune into the monthly Select Board capital updates and to review the individual requests using the database access provided through finance. We'd also like to thank Rick for graciously volunteering to be our database ambassador. And I think between your early access to request particulars, your respective representatives on Capcom, questions that database access may have answered, and any that can be answered today, our hope is to strengthen the review process. I'd like to start with a quick update on Capcom's FY22 request review cycle and where we are in that. So for requests submitted so far, we've completed department level interviews and discussion. Members are completing their independent review and ranking of each request. In the next few weeks, we'll examine and compare those rankings to create a group ranking for each request. We'll then collate and prioritize those rankings to form a worksheet style report, a copy of which you all, the Select Board and the FinCom, will receive in mid-December. Let's see, that document will include a description of each request. As a matter of practice, it is the equivalent of the simple mid-December reporting provided in years past. Other important tasks are scheduled as part and parcel to our process formulating a final report in January. They include review of preliminary funding sources, review and ranking of Select Board sponsored articles and citizen articles as may come up. Capital project status, a review of the capital project status report and discussion. And then finalizing funding sources and the tax rate and user fee impacts. At this point, and on this timeline, I imagine we'll have some discussion on Miller's Lane. That is, if an appropriation is going to be proposed. And there may have to be some discussion about a SWEF, the solid waste facility financial assurance mechanism that is pending. Also later in the meeting, Libby and Brian will discuss preliminary free cash, the apportionment of which typically on the capital setting way funds request under $1 million. I'll note that other funding sources can be forecast, go bonds, retained earnings, so on and so forth, but not finalized until all the requests are known, including those, if any, sponsored by the Select Board, and some others that Brian or Libby will touch on shortly. So with all that said, kind of an introduction, if there are any particular questions on FY22 requests, I'll field Capcom process related questions, and Libby will field any of merit or method on behalf of the department head. By the way, there are currently 54 requests totaling some $59 million. Procedurally, I would ask if, let's see, Erica, can you tell me how many participants there are so I know, at least with respect to my answering questions?
So you've got 21 people on this Zoom right now and 0 attendees, but 21 panelists.
Okay, great. So I think I can see everyone. Thank you, Erica. So if there's any questions at this point, capital program related process or on the merits of a particular request, we could field those now. Denise?
Thank you, Stephen. First off, compliments to the amount of information that we already have, and compliments, Rick, to the reports that you sent out and to access to the software. It was very easy to use the software and to, reconcile it back to the pages I had. And so I really felt it was quite a good way to review this. I too did, Stephen, I totaled it up as well. $58,604,358. And I also did a quick glance through, and I wanted to have you speak about your prioritization, because when I looked at the high priority ones for fiscal year 22, they come to 23 million and change. And that's about 40% of the requests so far, understanding that it's still preliminary and you haven't decided which ones are staying and going. So I just wanted to get an understanding of what gets to be high, and do we traditionally in prior years have the high ones always get funded? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate the input. Somebody needs to please mute. Okay. So let's see. With respect, there's a couple of different things here. One is the priority characterization that you're referring to is actually town admins. The capital program committee is working through the rankings of relative importance, and that will be the basis for the mid-December documentation that you receive. With respect to what typically gets funded, obviously it's what gets approved at town meeting, and unfortunately we know based on recommendations that we put forth as positive, those are not always funded. But with respect to priorities, Capcom takes a little bit different approach to priorities. We will develop the average and of the ranking of relative importance, and then we will put those forward. Anything above the average, unless there is a discussion on individual merits, will be advanced as a positive recommendation. Anything, what trumps that is anything that is a legal requirement or anything that would address an imminent threat to any capital resource. I hope that helps.
Very clear. Thank you, Stephen.
Any other questions on the Chris?
Yeah, you mentioned the total amount of the request. Do you have the number of what of that amount was held over from last year's town meeting?
I do, but I would defer to Rick on the breakdown. The portion of the reason being, I'll buy him a little time, but some of the requests from last year have been updated or supplemented or slightly revised to include slightly different numbers. But I think Rick can probably ballpark for us.
Well, yeah, exactly to Stephen's point. You can take something like road improvements and we'll have a different number in 22 from 21. So if you guys want to continue talking, I can tote it up here pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was really just looking for order of magnitude too. I mean,
It's about 6.4 million from Article 10 of last year. The original article was 8,592,000, and the revised article that went to the June 25th town meeting was 2.113 million. So,
and all that other stuff is coming back, Brian? There's nothing that went away, right?
it is not stuff that's gone away. It's been re-advanced and carried over into 22 for new discussions on prioritization for it.
And then refresh my memory, are we gonna have capital requests we're talking to that were voted down at the ballot subsequent to town meeting, even though they weren't brought forth, or do we have an issue there?
We had some projects that had successful ballot questions. One of the most notable ones is Children's Beach pump was a successful ballot question. Excuse me, but at a meeting prior to the annual town meeting, the board had made the decision that we would not vote to enact those potential ballot questions that were successful. I think as a matter of course, we'll continue to have discussions on what the board's appetite to bring some of those forward are again.
So just, do they come back to town meeting and then do they need to be reballoted after that?
They need, because we will have not done anything by the time we said they do need to be reballoted. They need to have both the whole process done over again.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other FY22 questions at this point? Hi, Jill. Go ahead.
Hi, I guess on that point that Chris just brought up, is there any value in writing the article so that if it gets delayed again, you don't have to bring it back again?
Well, the only way that you would really be able to do that would be, well, if it passed both the town meeting and a debt exclusion ballot, then you wouldn't have to bring it back again. If it were to be delayed for whatever reason, the only way to do it, to not have to bring it back completely, would be to just try to fund it within the levy limit, which would not be something that we could do from a borrowing perspective. And that was a borrowing authorization for that article.
Right.
So,
For the big
other than
stuff,
that,
it's all
no.
borrowing.
pardon me?
For the big stuff, it's all borrowing, right?
That's
I mean,
correct.
thank you.
Okay. Libby, do you want to key off that with some of the topics we discussed the other day, or in the update? Brian, you had provided a couple of potential requests, funding mechanisms and so on.
So I don't have that right in front of me, but if I'm remembering it properly, there are some items that are not in here yet, and a big one is potentially PFAS. Is that what you mean, Steve? Those types?
Yeah, the
Okay.
PFAS and then the capital, kind of a stabilization type of approach. Not
Yep.
really stabilization, but a funding mechanism for
The roads.
requests. Yeah.
Okay, so PFAS is an issue that is out there. We know we are most likely, we believe we are most likely going to have to incur some capital outlay or cost for something to do with PFAS, but it is pending an island-wide risk assessment and recommendations from our consultant. And we don't know the amount. So that's going to hopefully be known maybe by, well, I don't even think it's going to be known by the end of the year, but we may have to put a placeholder number in. And as we get closer to the end of the year, we may know a better idea what that is. Brian and I have been discussing a funding mechanism for capital projects that are mostly infrastructure or building related that tend to get some amount appropriated, but either we didn't appropriate it enough or the project somehow gets modified subsequent to the appropriation and then we can't do it because we don't have enough money. So Brian, do you want to explain your idea about that?
Sure. So as we look over all the requests, and the DPW director and I have had extensive conversations about this, the area that I had discussed most notably with the town manager and then had a brief discussion with the capital program committee was mostly highlighted around facilities. Right now, the facilities department through the DPW director has put forth requests for various amounts in multitudes of categories that to deal with the update and upkeep of the facilities that we have. And over the last couple of years, it was eliminated last year at town meeting, but we've been allocating approximately $1 million to various lines for facility, from roofs to general building envelopes to heating and ventilating systems and things of that nature. So knowing that we have a backlog and knowing that from a couple of years ago, one of the board's directives in capital was find a way to continue to upgrade and maintain the facilities that we currently have. So what I had proposed to the town manager was, and worked with Hilltop and had discussed the concept of committing annually, excuse me, a number of free cash, which still can be discussed. I had talked about 750,000 because it would back us into to be able to do a borrowing and an authorization for borrowing at an annual town meeting, which would give us the ability to have a lump sum amount of money that could be used to address the various backlogs that we have. It would be, and also enable us to direct some free cash to other needs that we have. What it would do is it would give the DPW director and the facilities department the bandwidth to start, when they start a project, to actually complete it. Because when we're allocating approximately $1 million across, say, 4 different product lines or facility lines, the DPW director has to wait till he gets a small amount of money in one particular area to go and do a project. And inevitably, in that time that we're waiting to do some of these projects, costs creep up more than we have, and then we have to look for other funding sources within all the capital, and we end up borrowing from one to complete a project in another, and it just has a downstream trickle effect that I'm trying to find a way to solve. So the proposal is that we consider a borrowing authorization, and this is not set in stone, but I'll give you an example of what we could do. If we committed $750,000 annually for 10 years in free cash right now, we could leverage $6.9 million upfront to allow DPW and facilities to leverage and use on projects to get facility updates and upgrades taken care of in a more timely fashion. Now, one of the things that I also talked to the manager about and Capcom was a set of controls around the fact that that money exists, and it's not that we run out and borrow it immediately. It's a defined set of projects every year that get done, and that we don't move on until those are fully completed. But it will enable us to actually make more forward progress in an area that I think everybody would agree we need to continue to make progress. So it's one of the ideas in this funding that we're talking about with Capcom. Certainly be something that we talk about with FinCom much more in depth if we do decide to pursue it. If it works within this facilities and we think that it's a success, it could certainly be something that we turn into road maintenance and sidewalking or cobblestone improvements. But I was thinking about facilities from the perspective that I think it's an area that we're trying to catch up and do, and the way that we're funding it right now is just a slow trickle, and we'll never get caught up with some of these facility improvements that we need based on the estimate of costs we already have to exist if we're waiting a couple years to do them.
Thanks, Brian. Christie, Kickham?
Yeah, Brian, would projects and allocations still be need to be reviewed each year?
Admittedly, Christy, I still haven't worked out every single detail, but it would be my expectation that we would develop a list that would still be reviewed with Capcom prior to moving forward. And most likely we would also include the lists that have been accomplished in the prior year as well for a discussion. But these are all things that I still admittedly have to partially work out how it would flow through every department, but it's something that I am working on as we speak.
Just on that point, for any other questions, I think from the Capcom perspective, one of the things we'll be looking at in addition to a defined project list is perhaps some other potentially beneficial controls, which would be either procedural and or policy related, because that will help us to, in a variety of ways, in going forward over any number of years, to provide guidance on how and where and when those funds could be used. I think it could be a very helpful tool in wrapping up some of these projects, but it'll be interesting to see how it develops. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments on the PFAS or the this funding mechanism for capital? Brian, I'm sorry, Denise, Brian, what are you referring to this as, so we can put an acronym to it?
I haven't got that creative yet, so
all right, I'll think of one.
Please.
Denise?
That's good. The Surfside Area Roads Reconstruction Phase 2 Lovers Lane, could that project be potentially impacted by any PFAS work that would happen in the area? So, we're doing new paving, new road construction, and then all of a sudden we're digging it up. So that occurred to me as I was looking through the list of projects, was one of my questions about that. And I realized that we don't know what we don't know yet. It's just something that occurred to me as I was looking through the projects.
I don't think we know that yet. And that's not, Lover's Lane is not within the airport's identified area.
It has on it that it's I'll Never Been Able Boulevard, or I can't say that.
Okawa.
Yeah, thank you. I can't no, I'm not even gonna try. Manahasset. So those aren't within the PFAS.
Some of them, parts of them are, but not all the way to Lover's Lane, I think is what Libby's saying.
Okay.
But I don't think they know because they haven't tested everything. I live in Okawa and just got my water tested, so it's still ongoing, right, Libby?
Yep, and quick plug, on Friday at 5 o'clock, the airport is having a PFAS update forum. So people who are interested could get onto that Friday at 5.
Okay. Very interesting. Joanna?
I just have a question about the $750,000 for 10 years from the free cash. Really, maybe the question's to Brian. Do you, even over the past 2 or 3 years, is there a list of the projects that fell into this category so we could take a look at them and understand what they were, and then maybe the differential between what we budgeted for them and what they came back as, so that we can sort of understand the 750 and then also understand what kind of projects these are being applied to?
Well, the last 2 years is really when this has been really kind of developed and focused on. And in the last year, in 2019 into 2020, we allocated $1 million. Basically, it was about 250,000 to general building envelope, $250,000 to roofs. And I can tell you that when we tried to do only 2 roofs, it was over $150,000 worth of bids for the 2 roofs. One of them being 39 Washington Street and the other being 38 Washington Street. And there's a lot of other projects coming up. And if we limp along and gather 250 every year and we run into bids where we're trying to do, say, 3 roofs and it's over 250, then again, we have to either look at some of the other articles, i.e. a general building envelope article to take the money from, which would then kind of take any of the other plans that the money is used for. Don't forget, it's used for any of the exterior work as well. So, I mean, 750 really was kind of the basis to see what the number would look like that we could generate on a 10-year basis for that. And in terms of a borrowing, it's not a number that I'm married to. And if we said it was 500,000 and that generated 6 million for discussion, then that works as well. It's just, the thought was trying to be more creative about how are we going to get to fund a lot of these projects and building maintenance that we need to. It does have a list. Go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
The question is that, so if you put aside 250 for those roofs, did one roof get done or no roofs got done?
We got 2 done, but we wouldn't have been able to proceed any further because that would have left us just under 100,000 to do anything remaining that needed to be done. So we're stuck in a holding pattern where we need another town meeting, which would give us another 250, which would have 350,000 in an article. And now we could move forward to do some others. And by the way, that the money for those, we had to rebid both of those projects because the bids just were so high the first time that we had to actually put them out again.
Right.
So,
but it's,
go ahead.
So then I asked the question about the procurement piece of all this, because it seems like this is a theme that we've heard multiple times, right? Which is that we get an estimate that comes back too high. We have to go back out for rebids. Is there some sort of a way to address this through procurement?
No.
Right? There isn't.
No. We're bound by the rules under either Chapter 30B, 3039M, or 149. Roofs are under 149, and it's very strict and stringent. And we also have to remember that a lot of times we don't get as much competition from on-island contractors. A lot of times it's off-island contractors that bid on this work, just because on-island contractors have more than enough work, and some of them just don't really like all of the hoops that they have to jump through for municipal work, which I cannot get out of. And then you incur substantial mobilization costs when you have people coming from off island to do the work.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, no, I support trying to find a way to do this. It's one of the things that has sort of stuck out to me, that, sort of we need to do a better job of. But we have to also look, what is the root cause of not having, money to take care of your buildings? And I look at that, in my building, I say, okay, X amount has to be put aside a year. So if we, if that's being crowded out by other issues, then at some point we need to address that. Because I support this, Brian. I think it's great. I don't think it even goes far enough. You just take a look at the town building and there's rotten gutters and rotten windowsills and things there that if you take a look, you're like, well, this isn't right. And so, the way around the bidding, and I'm not saying we have the staff to do it. If you correct me if I'm wrong, couldn't you hire a couple people that did maintenance as their full-time job? And they would do those small jobs, not maybe a roof, but they could do all the rot and the stuff like that, correct?
We could, are you talking about on staff or just hiring a couple firms?
No, just on staff. If we had people on staff, we could send them out to fix rotten gutters and things like that.
We could, but I think that what would happen is the same point about capital getting crowded out. To do that, we've got to, other priorities would get crowded out as well if we were to hire long-term staff. But then again, I'm not entirely sure that we would be able to do that anyway. To be honest with you, I don't know that we would be successful in that approach either. In finding people that want that staff to do it, people to hire. I'm not entirely sure that we could.
No, and I agree. The hiring would be difficult, but that's one way. If you had a dedicated couple guys that drove around and dealt with this, before it gets to the point that some of these places get, because then they're major issues.
Correct.
And I've let that happen on my own properties. So
This is something that, Matt, we might be addressing possibly a little bit later in the board's municipal facilities workshop, because Rob has been trying to increase his facilities staff, and he has a couple of requests in for fiscal 22. And, we do have a lot of requests for new positions, and he has a couple of vacancies right now. It is a good concept what you're saying. If we're going to have a real facilities department, we need more people. They need to be qualified. In some cases they require certifications. And I think what we find is the town simply doesn't pay enough to hire those people.
All right. From the capital side, I think I think I can speak for our group, is that a dollar spent on maintenance versus renovation, maintenance or repairs is a dollar spent is a dollar saved. And in this environment with wage and primarily materials escalations, it's maybe more like $1.50 saved. Christy, did you have a comment?
I did. Brian, I was just curious to know if the 6.9 was based on existing projects and outlook, or is that based on what we'd be approved for?
That's based on committing $750,000 to free cash annually for 10 years and inverting based on a level debt service payment, what the interest rate would look like, and then what would be available to go towards principal. So it just goes backwards. And I talked to Hilltop and said, if I committed $750,000 a year annually, what would I be able to ask for in a debt authorization to be able to have the ability to borrow? And depending on the interest rate, it ranges from about $6.5 million to $6.9 million.
Thanks, Brian. All right. Any other thoughts on these topics or others while we're here as a group? Denise?
Stephen, are we also going to talk about the 10-year outlook? Are you coming to that next, or should that be spoken about now?
Yeah, no, we can bring, thanks for bringing it up. Where we are is that we have set some action items for, currently we have the 10-year plan is more of a list form than anything else. We are going to be working with the finance department to develop a more comprehensive, robust 10-year plan that looks at financial capacity analysis, a host of different important metrics and items that could be reported on and considered, and that would be beneficial to have in a report. That even the outline of that type of report is going to take some heavy lifting. And it's something that Rick and Finance and Libby, I think, aren't at this point ready or able to do just because of other things that are already in the pipe. So we've set some action dates for working to begin to look at the outline on that more robust approach for spring. And in the meantime, we have the 10-year list that you all have received. We have, concerns, as probably you all do, with the fact that sometimes a request is on it, sometimes it goes off the list. There is not a defined policy or procedure with respect to what's the threshold under which a dollar number is added, and what are the policies and procedures surrounding how accurate it is or precise, and also how far out is it even reasonable to be considering whether that we should have an accurate number. So there's some small discussions and large discussions and a bunch of lifting to do. But for now, we have the list, and I think we're happy to entertain any questions you might have about it.
Thank you. That's great. When I was going through the list and being a former auditor, I reconcile things. So I looked at under DPW, page 1, says Public Works campus-wide impact. It has $150,000 for, it says prior authorization fiscal year 22. And then, so that means it didn't make it into this fiscal year 22. So that was anticipated, but it didn't make the cut because in DPW on our current list, there is no Public Works campus-wide improvements. And frankly, the reason why it stuck out to me is because in fiscal year 23, it has $18 million tied to it. So, you know, I was kind of looking for the big numbers and then looking back and then taking it back to the fiscal year 22 list. And then I just stopped doing that. But I just saw, I had a question as to, so maybe it's just a question of what's on the tenure list of the prior authorization fiscal year 22 request does not mean it is on the fiscal year 22 request. And it could be just my way of reading the reports.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
that
sorry,
was
Denise.
slipped through.
Which, could you tell me again which, I just was pulling up the report. I wanted to take a
Sure.
quick look at it.
Public Works campus-wide improvements, it's FAC 17001.
The last one.
And Rick, if you want to jump in
Yeah,
on that while I'm pulling
So,
it
so
up.
that column, sorry, and it's a little noisy in the background here. That column is prior year authorization plus the any FY 22 request. So the way you read that is that there's a prior authorization
Okay,
of $150,000 previous to 22.
okay,
And then the 18 is what's in, the 18 million is what the director has in for FY 23.
okay. So are we actually spending against this project in fiscal year 22? And so the first report we got was, here's the new requests, and the 10-year plan has old requests plus new requests. Is that am I interpreting that correctly?
So the capital committee had asked for to be able to see out year spending plus any prior year authorization for a given project.
Okay.
So that's what that is what that column represents. There's $150,000. There's nothing in
There's no new request.
There's no 22 request for that.
Okay, it just happens to be, it's going to be spent in 22. It's not a new request for 22. So the first document we went
It's there
through
to be spent.
is but the first document we went through, which is probably not helpful that I'm trying to do it this way, which is the capital improvement plan. This is just that's what's been asked for so far for fiscal year 22. The one with 10 years has everything that's rolled forward that's going to land in 22 and out.
Correct. And any, Rick, if you don't, and any
Clear to me, at least.
recent prior year expenditures, actually, that question came up at the last year's joint meeting. I think Joanna had asked for, as opposed to having to go back and fish through other documents, which makes perfect sense to me, to have a couple of columns so we knew what had been approved, not necessarily what was spent. That we invite you to a capital status project update at the Capcom when we have it. But other than that, it's high level summary information of what's either been approved or what is anticipated to be asked for.
Okay, thank you.
Joanna?
So so I just want to confirm, so I followed along with what Denise said. So then if it's in the column prior authorization FY 22 request, that means it has been approved for all things in that column, in every category.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
I just want to make sure I'm reading it properly. Thank you.
Good questions. Information's only good if we all understand the same thing, or at least its use. Any other questions or thoughts at this point? No? All right. Well, thank you all. We, as I said, we'll be getting a list of our recommendations with respect to a preliminary list out in mid-December. And that will track previous year's mid-December report. And then in January, we'll be getting out a more comprehensive report that includes the tax rate and user fee and breakdown by funding sources and our recommendations for upcoming and future years. Both policy, procedure, and perhaps we'll be able to get into the 10-year SIP. I don't know that we'll have the 10-year SIP included in the report this year still, but it is a goal for future years.
Stephen, this was very helpful from my side, and I appreciate that we have this clarity this early in the process. It's really quite helpful getting access, as I said before, getting access. And Rick, I very much appreciate your capital updates at the select board. They're also very good. So I think we're just getting better at this. And from my perspective, it was always a good process, but I think it's getting to be a better process. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right. With that, I would, I guess, since I'm up at chair at this point, take a motion to adjourn from capital program. Chris, can we do a group? Do we have to do individual votes?
You have to do roll call.
Yes, and
Okay.
you have to do roll
Just-
call.
I was hoping. Christie, on your motion?
Yes.
Christie Parangelo, Christie Kickham,
Yes.
Richard Hussey,
Yes.
Peter Kaiser,
Aye.
and myself and I. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you around Zoom.
Thank you all for your
Thanks,
hard
Stephen.
work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Denise, do you want to adjourn next?
Yes, thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn FinCom?
Motion to
moved.
adjourn.
Second,
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 thank you by roll call, Peter Schaefer,
yes.
Jill Veith,
Yes.
Joanna Roche,
yes.
Stephen Morey,
Yes.
Denise Crono, yes. Oh, George Harrington. Still quiet on George's side. Denise Crono, yes. Okay, we're adjourned. Over to you, Dawn.
Thank you, Denise.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the select board.
Thank you, Melissa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Those in favor by roll call, Christy Parentella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
I lost Jason. Don Holkey, bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.